I would argue for the rest of us, this is what separates knowledge from wisdom. Knowledge, it's gone. I can prompt my way to access the world's knowledge, right, in one easy prompt box. But wisdom is the ability to know and interpret and leverage your experience to apply knowledge, ask better questions, push kind of what might be on the other side.
Welcome to the future of marketing, everybody. We're so thrilled to have our guest today, Anthony Kennada, who runs a consultancy called Goldenhour. But that is not his first step along this amazing path of his. I would say that he's one of the few marketers who has pulled off something truly extraordinary. He helped a company go from absolutely zero to 100 million in ARR, and then also is responsible for kind of creating a whole new profession. When you joined the company Gainsight, Anthony, as the first marketing hire, your title was actually Customer Success Manager, which was barely a thing on LinkedIn. But by the time you left, there were tens of thousands of CSMs around the world, and Gainsight had become a billion-dollar company. You're also the author of Category Creation, a playbook on how to build brands that customers, employees, and investors love. And obviously you've made a massive leap in the direction of marketing, becoming one of Forbes' most influential CMOs. And of course, like I said, you're now the CEO of Goldenhour. We're so excited to learn more about that and about you in general. Thanks so much for being here with us.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor.
So Anthony, I think the way this came to be is I saw something you're organizing on LinkedIn around, and it was called the end of marketing, right? So do you really think AI is killing marketing?
It's a good question. It's a provocative title to spark conversation, that's for sure. What I think is happening is the sort of marketing automation boom that we saw, inbound marketing, whatever we want to refer to it as, which if you kind of zoom out, at least in the B2B context, kind of defines our job as marketers. Like everything sort of fell into this idea of our job is to send qualified traffic to our own services, to convert that traffic with some type of content offer, event offer, what have you, and then spam those people until they either take a demo or unsubscribe, and then fight with sales on who gets the credit for it, right? That's sort of been, of course, kind of a caricature of the practice. We obviously do so much more, but I think that is ending. And it wasn't just AI. I think it was sort of death by a thousand cuts. It was the fact that our audiences are getting wiser to filling out forms because they've been on the other end of all of this. We've created kind of bad experiences in favor of driving more and better metrics. And we've been through a lot as a practice too, in the sort of post-COVID boom, the ZERP era kind of investments we've made, the kind of efficient growth kind of follow-up as well. And so I think marketing in general has been wounded, and AI is just creating opportunity and solutions to help solve a lot of the things that have been exposed now through this effort. But it's not all a bad thing, I guess, as well. And what I mean by that is maybe there's certain parts of the practice that should be automated, that it's okay that agents are taking on that work. And might that free us up actually to do the best work of our lives? And whether we call that marketing or whatever it is that comes next, I sense I'm actually optimistic kind of through all of that, that there's some real human value to be created with the creatives, the experiential kind of, strategies and so on. So,
yeah, what do you think that human value will be? Like if you were a very junior person, and I've been talking to people like kind of graduating college, and they're very worried about like, is there a job for them? So if they're actually interested in like going into the marketing field, what do you think is important? What skills should they actually develop?
Well, one of the as products are becoming easier to create using AI and generative tools, The real kind of existential challenge is distribution. Like, how can I be seen as a vendor? How do I stand out and not get lost in the sea of sameness? This is, I would argue, one of the existential questions of our time. And I think marketing or some derivative of it is on the hook to solve that problem. So if you are studying or coming out of, university or early in your career, it's arguably like one of the best times in the world to be in this kind of vertical to go and actually solve this problem. Now, I'm of the mind, to answer the question directly, that a lot of the performance marketing components of the job, paid ad optimization, experimentation on social, a lot of the programmatic AEO type of roles, those are becoming engineering problems to solve, whether you're in marketing or wherever it sits. But we're using an orchestration of agents to solve those problems. So when I say human, I mean what are the attributes of our humanity that we want to embody in our brand? Things that a machine can't replace, and even if it could, we would still choose humanity to do that work. And so I think that would be authenticity, for one. How do we sort of show up in conversations like this as our true and authentic selves? And how do we put our founders in positions to be the embodiment publicly of the brand? I think emotions. How do we tell emotional stories that aren't just rooted in feature function, but win the hearts and the minds of our audiences? How do we build connection at scale using things like this? These aren't three avatars that are talking right now, right? These are three humans telling a story that hopefully reaches a lot of people at scale. Maybe one more: belonging. I don't think AI can facilitate belonging, but events, community experiences, these are the things that really kind of bind us together as humans. And so my belief is these and many more are the attributes of a brand that stands out, that isn't lost in the sea of sameness, and ultimately gets the distribution to grow and be relevant in this new world.
Yeah. One of the things that I find interesting about you is that you've always kind of referred to yourself as a B2B marketer trapped in a B2C marketer's body. And I wonder if the change you're describing actually lends itself even more to this trend that some people have called the consumerization of the enterprise or something along those lines. But do you think that more people need to be B2C marketers essentially in this AI world?
Probably. Honestly, I mean, or reflect your own experience as a consumer of products and services and say, like, how do I interact and build with different brands and make purchasing decisions? And that was sort of like my declaration of that statement wasn't because I came from a consumer context. It was because I watched, The Tonight Show and what they were doing on social media. And I loved Airbnb and just watched all of the incredible things that they did. And it was like, why couldn't that work for customer success software? If I'm building accounting software, like why wouldn't some of these tactics work to build community and almost like a lifestyle brand for accountants who are trying to self-actualize in their careers? And we just happen to sell software as well to help them solve those problems. So yeah, I think that it's just as relevant today, if not more, in a world where we're just competing on features. Like, this is how one stands out.
Yeah. It's interesting. I heard from a friend recently this idea that buyers are going to stay way more human than sellers for a long time, because a human is always going to be on the other end of that buying decision. Even if they do have their agents aggregate sort of what they should be doing, they're still making the call and they're still a human. So I wonder if that augments this argument for you have to just speak to them the way that real people speak.
I think it's true. I think it's a good and to the AEO equation. So I'm not suggesting we shouldn't be thoughtful in how we train these frontier labs to like understand our product value proposition, train it on customer voice using the G2 crowds and others. And so I think all that is important. But you're right. I think I believe in a future where people are always part of that decision and people buy from people. So how do you build trust and familiarity and, preference and all of these things? It's not just what comes off the other end of a prompt. It comes across in the brand that you build and how you show up and what you're known for.
That's interesting. I think a lot about, is that actually true? Will people buy from people? And I think we're starting to see ticket items that are small where people are letting AI make that decision and they will pick the first thing. And I think it reminds me a lot of mobile, right? Like at the beginning of mobile, people would only buy very small things on their mobile phone. No one would buy a house or a car on their mobile phone, but now they do. So will there be a world in which actually that will change and people will let AI make the decision? And when you think about brand, do you have to build a brand that appeals to how AI sees you? I think that's kind of I'm wondering about that. I'm curious if you have an opinion at all around how do you market to agents beyond obviously having information that they can read, which I think everyone's doing.
By the way, I wonder about that too, and definitely don't have a crystal ball. I have a preference that humans are still involved in commerce in the future, but I've seen the same thing that you have seen, in that it's more of these kind of transactional purchases that were okay, with AI kind of making the call. So I think that considered purchases, if you're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to $1 million plus on software, I just can't see a world that is completely outsourced to an agent to make that decision. Maybe a recommendation for sure, but if you've ever sold to the enterprise, that there's buying committees, there's security, compliance, these are hardcore processes in some cases, right? And so, but I do think that that initial conversation that used to be, I don't know, a Google search or something, instead of that prompt going into a Google kind of window, it's going into a ChatGPT or Claude or whatever it is, and you better show up. You better have someone on your team or a team on your team whose job is to make sure you're represented in that short list, that the value proposition is accurate, that you're cultivating the data signal that is ultimately feeding that recommendation. Again, be it customer voice or third-party citations with PR and comms, all of the pieces that are actually, coloring the responses of the labs. It is mission critical to do it. I think my hope and bias is that it's just such an important and critical to building a human brand that has a relationship and builds trust and familiarity.
Maybe thinking about how that's going to show up in budgets a little bit, but I'm curious, do you think most CMOs should still be spending a ton in one area that they traditionally still have?
Yeah, I think it's interesting, right? I think when I look at the marketing budgets I've operated, there's been sort of an over-index on paid distribution and paid budgets. And I'm curious how you would deploy that paid capital to the paid media budget today in a world where, certainly in a world where a lot of what we're talking about so far is fairly organic. So I think that might be one area I would potentially revisit. On the other side, though, I think there's a increase to non-obvious areas of the budget that one might consider. There's a few sort of early stage AI companies that I'm aware of and involved with who are almost only doing events in their first kind of foray. Because they're we're not even gonna play this kind of digital competition. We're gonna go direct to our clients, build incredible experiences, and be sort of event led or whatever. Because they sell to it's basically an ABM play to Fortune 500 accounts.
Absolutely. Do you see we're going to dig into events more later, but I'm curious if there are just any types of events within that wheelhouse that are overperforming right now.
There's just such a hunger to be in person and be with each other. And I think that's that in general, the event kind of category by and large, I think is working well today. There's a lot of field marketing still, I think, us as a brand coming to the customer versus asking them to get on a flight. And so whether that's like a dinner experience or something that's a bit more high touch. But one thing that I think is interesting is, as obviously the volume of events kind of go up, the question becomes, what do I attend as someone that is getting invited to many of these things? And what makes someone get on a plane if you're not going to come into my town or my city? And definitely seeing kind of this push towards more experiential type moments, or experiential forward events, ones that actually put a big preference on or intention around offline presence, kind of almost like a wellness type of angle to it all as well. And so I think that hunger for like getting off of the digital distraction and digital noise and AI slop and what's real anymore, but kind of leaning the other way into creating something like an offsite for clients or a retreat type of experience. I think that's kind of increasingly becoming a format that is emerging.
Camille and I were at a dinner at an event the other night, and they gave us little pouches for our phones, and it was very painful to put my phone in a pouch, but then I was forced to pay attention.
Yeah, of course. There's something generational about that too. I'm hearing, just in my study of this, like the Gen Z trend around flip phones is a thing. Like there's this rebellion against digital just dopamine addiction. And so for us growing up, obviously, wherever we are, millennials, I think, it's almost like painful for us to get away from our devices, even though we know it's good. And it's interesting to see kind of the Gen Z group kind of getting into the workforce and how they're kind of influencing some of this too.
I really love that. More power to them.
Yes.
I think we're living in a very interesting, I think almost like a new era where there's so many new companies popping up. Everything is changing. And I think what I love about your background is that you have put a lot of thought into what does positioning look like. And I think a lot of companies struggle with positioning today, and not just new companies, but the older companies, because everything has shifted. Everyone needs to rethink what's their new position in this like completely different world. So I'd love to hear about how you thought about positioning at Gainsight, and what are some of the lessons you're taking from that and helping either older companies or newer companies rethink their positioning.
Yeah, with Gainsight, it was a very interesting case study in that when we started, there wasn't this sort of incumbent like brand in the market that we were looking to unseat or take a challenger position on. And so we started talking to analysts, weirdly enough. Both Nick and I had come from like a big company right before that. And so that felt like the right playbook. Like, what does Gartner want us to position as? And what's interesting is all this was back in the predictive marketing, predictive analytics kind of phase of the early 2010s, I guess. And none of it felt authentic. None of it felt like, kind of who we were building for. And we had the benefit of having this job function that existed in the market. Camille, you hit it on the head, the customer success manager. We didn't name it, but I think Salesforce did. And there was maybe, a few dozen people on LinkedIn. 80% of them worked at Salesforce. And so we went to one of their meetups that they had in the Valley. And it was just like not a fancy event or anything, but just, halogen lights and pizza and beer or whatever. And there was this like feeling like, oh my gosh, I am finally around other people who are going through what I'm going through. This like kind of palpable sense of community and belonging. And so the decision that we made off of that hypothesis was, what if we positioned around the persona and the pain that they were experiencing, versus over-rotating on features and kind of telling more of the why, not just the what. And it was this idea that, churn was the elephant in the boardroom. No one was talking about it. And here's our hero who's tasked to doing something about it. And they have no budget, no support, no, technology to really help them do it. And we built a brand for them. So it's very much an audience first, persona first, ICP first positioning strategy. And that's what led us down the path of kind of what ended up becoming category creation. We didn't know it or name it that at the time. And so I think some of the lessons there for today is like, okay, everyone if you're a startup, if you're an early stage founder and you're looking to position the company, it feels like there are more vendors than ever in your category or adjacent to it. And so telling the story as the revenue agents for whatever, like there's like a million companies, right, that do that. Tell the why and talk about the impact that your technology is making on the customer and position just a bit upstream of what you normally would from the product marketing context. And I think that's sort of one of the bigger lessons on the enterprise side. Then you're right. Like, how do we reposition into relevance in this new world? And it's almost this other angle of attack to say, we have credibility. We've been here for a while. We understand, we have data. We understand you, audience, and kind of your needs. How can we sort of leverage that credibility to tell a new story or refresh our positioning in general? So I think the Gainsight story really anchored me around the importance of the why. And then solving for positioning around customer pain and not just positioning around platform capability.
That's super interesting. I also picked out the term that you use there, audience first. And it's something that I know you've spoken a lot about and you've built an entire company around, which we'll delve into. But can you tell us what that means in a pithy way, but then also like how it's changing today?
Yeah, I think in B2B, we talk about like personas and ICP and those types of things, which are good and important things.
And a lot of people think that is audience first marketing. They're like, I know my ICP. I got it.
Exactly. And it's kind of become a meme maybe a little bit in B2B, but if folks haven't heard it, like this 95-5 rule, where if you look at your overall audience, meaning anyone who is within your kind of the job titles you might sell to, the industries you might sell to.
Like size of company
Generally, but they're in or out of your funnel, but they're out there on the internet paying attention to your brand. If you look at 100% of that pie chart, only 5% are actually in market today to buy something from you or from your category, from your competitors even at large. And so for that 5% lens, and this is where I'm actually super excited about the work of agents to help us capture that existing demand that exists. It's great to be able to just give them the best experience to buy, position yourselves competitively, talk about how your customers are getting value from your services. All that's really, really good. Run the traditional play to get them across the finish line in the best way possible. But what do you do with the 95%? The overwhelming majority of people who may not be in market yet, but they're following and they're paying attention.
Like they're leaning in, right? They're like, I'll learn about that.
Exactly. And overlay that with the Jeffrey Moore technology adoption curve. These are, folks that are either like innovators and wanting to buy something today and test it and will give you grace if your product doesn't live up to its potential or whatever. But then you've got the late majority and the laggards and others who want to see proof that you're going to be in business, that you're like going to, be trustworthy with critical data and context and their compliance needs and all these sorts of things. So your audience that's paying attention is everywhere. But how can you meet them where they're at, understand them, learn from them by leading a conversation? And that conversation could be your manifesto for your company. It could be your strategic narrative that you have around how the category is emerging and evolving, a point of conviction that you might have. I don't think, at least if you're an early stage founder, you have to have it all figured out. But might you have the courage to say something and then to build content marketing to continue to speak into that observation or problem that you want to solve or whatever. And conversations just like this one, written posts, whatever it is, And what you'll start to see is followership, and people will either say, no, I don't agree with you at all. And you'll learn and kind of the idea will take shape, or you'll build followership and become known for that thing that you're talking about. And so that's what I see as the play with audiences. We've over-indexed on like, from an ABM perspective on like the 50 chief legal officers and the top 50 companies in the world that we want to get in front of. And that's great. But what about sort of taking an approach that allows you to learn while also serving people and delivering value with content along the way?
This episode is brought to you by Upside. If you've ever tried to answer the question, what actually drove that deal, or where should I invest next quarter, you know how messy B2B intelligence really is. Upside is a revenue intelligence platform built by engineers and marketers who spent over a decade in the trenches at companies like Branch, Outreach, and MuleSoft. We got tired of building internal tools just to make sense of our own data, so we built a platform we always wish we had. Upside uses AI to unlock and organize the messy data in calls, transcripts, Salesforce fields, marketing automation tools, and beyond to help you answer the questions you never could before. Questions like what actually drove a specific deal and how brand awareness helped influence the buying group, or the reasons you are winning or losing. Better insights, smarter decisions, stronger outcomes. If you're ready to act with confidence rather than guessing, head to Upside.tech to learn more. I was thinking a lot about this because I was doing I think measurement is basically something that's lacking here. And like one example I have is we were working with our friend Ethan, and originally when we were helping them understand the value of events, it looked like their events weren't that valuable because the people in their accounts weren't coming to events. But then when we look deeper, actually, the people, like 50% of their deals come from the referrals, and the people who referred the deals went to his events. But that's very hard to measure, right? And it's like, if you're only looking at ABM and you only want to get to that 100 people, it's very hard to like you only do the things that, but I think what you're saying is like, it's not just that you, like those people are listening, but it could be the person that someone else listens to. So it's very important, but measurement is very hard there. And I'm curious how you think about, obviously for events, actually, Upside helps with that because you look at how people found out about something. But for something like brand and like just like the authenticity, like how much does brand influence? Like what do you think is the solution for like getting people to see the value of that?
So, I mean, I had John Miller on my show a couple weeks ago, the godfather of the MQL and attribution, all these things. And he's like, it's over for attribution. Like there's no more, and again, one person's opinion, but a very vocal one, very important one, saying that there are certain things we will just not be able to measure. And so that's not a good answer, but that's one answer that says for some of these like really complex brand campaigns or initiatives, the risk of trying to over-engineer measurement may in fact reduce like the potential creatively or the impact to the customer kind of more broadly. Then there's, if you zoom out from that one degree, you've got the sort of self-reported attribution kind of trend, which I think is still semi-relevant. Like, how did you hear about us? And asking people. But I think sort of it's a problem that I think is just a known issue without a great answer today broadly. Like there's sort of like survey level quantitative data we can do programmatically. But for something like word of mouth, I don't have any great kind of silver bullets for us of how to track that.
I think the way we solve it is we look at all the touch points like a call or forms, and we pull all of that out. And I think that actually solves events and word of mouth. I think what it doesn't solve, and I don't know the answer, is how important was the brand to oh, this person told me about Upside and I decided to give you guys a try. That's cool. and you can get that from them answering on a call or in an email. The problem is you don't actually know how much of them actually taking the call was them seeing my LinkedIn and knowing about me or hearing about the company, because that's always part of it. And I think it's almost like you can't go into people's brains and understand how much their awareness and have seen it on the street, a billboard, like actually matters in that decision.
Yeah. It's a paradox though, isn't it? Because we know it matters, but it is difficult to measure. And so one of the things I've thought about is how do we just have this conversation with our CRO, our head of sales, our head of customer success, and sort of like come to the table together and say, hey, there's certain bets we want to make, maybe 10% of our budget, 20% of our budget, that I'm not going to be able to tell you with a certain level of detail how this is generating demand. But we've met and we believe it's a bet worth making. The billboard, the buzzy launch video, or whatever it is. And I think that for some companies, at least, that are believing in marketing and the impact of brand, then, so long as these are calculated risks and we experiment, and if it works, whatever works means, but if sales feels like they're getting supported or generating leads off of it, then we look to kind of expand further out from there.
I think the other interesting thing you mentioned earlier was around like, you think that the future of marketing is basically this like brand marketer, and then demand gen moves to engineering. And I want to dive deeper into this. I don't agree with it. I think there's a new role that's emerging, which is like this GTM engineer. And I've been doing, so I looked like 1,200, but I'm trying to figure out who is the best GTM engineer. Is it someone coming from engineering who's more technical, or is it actually a marketer that now with AI can actually build demand at scale and build that orchestration? And I've actually found that there are roles and there are jobs where the background is one or the other, and I don't know which one is going to be better, but I'm curious if you have an opinion around like how this role is emerging, and do you actually need any marketing background to run demand?
By the way, to be clear, I think it's becoming an engineering problem, but it may very well live in marketing, meaning that it's a function of leveraging tools and orchestration and a certain quantifiable or quant skill set, I think, to be able to solve the problems and perhaps to be building things, right? Like the internal tools and whatnot. My point of view generally is you need a human that can be accountable to an outcome, who understands how revenue is generated, who can stand, in a pipeline meeting or whatever next to a sales leader and build relationship and build trust, and that to me feels like a very important part of this. That if we were to just bring in someone who is a great engineer but has no context on how sales teams work, I think we end up missing a little bit of the opportunity. So I do see it as being more of an engineering mindset, but my bias would be to hire the revenue marketer. And by the way, I don't think this is like fully, like, I think AI is again leading this transformation perhaps, but we've seen growth marketing being reporting into product for some time, or at least in some cases, or growth kind of more broadly, I guess. So I think it's a continuation of that trend now that the technology has caught up.
No, I think that's true. I think my worry is more like I'm looking at all these roles and everyone's looking for senior. And so I think the question is, how do you become the person? Like, if you're a junior person who doesn't have experience but is engineering minded, how do you get the experience to understand campaigns and the marketing, how marketing works? You can actually be into that role if no one wants to hire junior people.
It's a weird time. Yeah. If you're a senior person who knows it, you have to be willing to get hands-on again and be scrappy and learn the tools and be fluent in tier one, best-in-class agentic orchestration to drive outcomes. So there's no doubt about that. If you're junior, Yeah, I don't know. You have to out hustle everyone. You have to work hard, and maybe a lot of that is the same thing it's kind of always been. But I've met a lot of these founders that have pretty deep like familiarity with revenue, and they're young, and I think there's a lot of really good kind of potential for the curious and the hungry and those willing to learn.
I actually know quite a few of these people on the brand storytelling side of the equation, which I know is also something that you give so much thought to on a daily basis. And there's this just exquisite 26-year-old brand marketer I know at one of these major up-and-coming AI companies. She doesn't know what her career is going to look like inside of 3 years. Do you have a sense of what you might tell her?
You're not alone. You're not alone. I think storytelling is just going to be so critical, and it has been forever, and will only continue to be one of the best skills that is hard to teach. I feel like it's something you have curated within you, perhaps as a human or as a marketer, as a creative, however you would best identify. So I think. Functionally, I'm not sure how that plays out, but I would argue folks that are great writers, that are have a sense of imagination and can really kind of inspire with words, and not just words, with I would argue great design, with again experiences that we create, like who can really capture the human experience as a premium and really kind of lead with that. I think that there's just so much potential, and like the sky's the limit for that. That is a future-proof skill set in a world of increasing automation and transactional volume-based, commerce or content creation, or name your whatever output.
You founded a company called Audience Plus, and a lot of that was about celebrating this type of storytelling, or owned media, which I think was a term that, you can tell me if you agree, peaked in the last couple of years and is maybe now on the other side of the apex. I'm curious how you're seeing the term owned media evolve right now rapidly.
Well, Audience Plus unfortunately didn't make it very, very far, and so I think
I loved it. I was a big fan. I was at your big flagship conference.
You were. That was one of the greatest days of my life. So I appreciate you being there. I feel like I can just give the real talk on owned media, because I think it's worth inspecting together. And Camille, I look up to you as someone who understands this world much better than I do. But I found that it's very hard for marketers. It is very hard for marketers broadly to, one, develop content good enough to actually capture the attention of the audience.
Absolutely. Without distribution, it's just like a no-go.
And that's the other bit, right? It's like, now you've developed great content. Can you get it seen? Can people actually see it? Can you clip it and have enough attention-grabbing visual audio hooks or whatever that it interrupts the pattern in the feed and it reaches your audience? That's like job number 2, right?
It's so interesting to hear you say feed in this respect, because I think we're all kind of performing in service to the feed.
Yeah, exactly, right? Whatever the algo wants, we all give it. And then third, of course, is now you have to somehow deplatform that view in the feed to your website, which flies in the face of every algorithmic intention on all of these platforms. And then there's a fourth step. Now you have to get someone, once they're on your site, to love it so much that they're willing to subscribe and fill out a form. And that's a lot to ask for a marketing team, especially one that is operating under an efficient growth charter, that doesn't have maybe the headcount that they used to, or that is feeling the pressure of budget and pipeline expectations. And so I think what we found, our story, is that owned media is an incredible promise. And there are companies that can do it really well at scale. But if you're a small team at a small company and you have to jump those 4 major hurdles to be able to build a dedicated audience, it's just hard. It's certainly not impossible. We see the new media trend and, really taking shape, and there's incredible creators that are doing a great job. By the way, you should probably hire one of them at your company because they've cracked this code. But I would just say owned media is incredibly powerful done right. Just really hard to do for B2B companies, especially.
I love that you talk about the stack of like, this has to go right, then this has to go right. And it really is, that's in my experience, the case that it's so rare for all those reasons. I'm curious now, talking a little bit about what you're up to these days with Goldenhour. Tell us a little bit, give us the lay of the land a bit on what it is you help companies do.
Yeah, I mean, it might be worth even going chronologically. We did a very small asset sale of Audience Plus 15, 16 months ago now, so just over a year ago. And it was a very sad thing. I sort of had to figure out okay, I haven't sat in the seat of the CMO in a while. Meanwhile, AI has totally changed everything. And who am I in this new world? And so what I started to do was I kind of fell into consulting, which I'd never done before, this 1099 life, and started working with a bunch of incredible early stage founders that are AI native, or however you want to frame it. They're building incredible AI companies, and they didn't have the senior level kind of marketing leadership to help them kind of go from 0 to 1, to do their positioning work, to coordinate their launch moment, to maybe do a visual identity exercise and kind of create the story, create the website, to host some of their events. And so picked up one client that turned to 2, that turned into 3. And what I started to realize is this was just me plus a shared project in ChatGPT, basically, trying to run a brand, like a brand narrative, brand positioning kind of exercise. But it was really interesting because I am not a copywriter. I am not a researcher. I am not a, even to some extent, brand marketer. But I have a sense of what good looks like. And my understanding and working with the client is what they're looking for too. And I have this process, having sat on the other side of the table with these agencies, of how to do stakeholder interviews and build territory work and turn that into positioning and creative briefs. And so I found that over the course of the year, I was effectively asking ChatGPT to embody these roles, and that I, as a one person solo whatever, could execute work of I'd like to think of a really good agency, and to do it faster and a lot cheaper. And so that was sort of where the light bulb started going off. And earlier this year, we started to see this big push toward AI native services or AI native agencies. And that's where I was well, maybe just me and ChatGPT is one way to do this. But what might happen if we actually built sort of a canonical kind of brand brain that existed for a client that actually understood all of, not just kind of the output of the messaging doc, but all of the prompting and the context and everything that got us there, every interview, every kind of conversation. And then if we were to do that, how might we build activation agents on top of that to actually execute content or design or event execution or whatever it is, colored by the context of this proprietary brain. And so that's kind of given the shape to a very, very early days of what I think Goldenhour is becoming, which is to say, what would it look like to rebuild Ogilvy for the AI era? And that's kind of sort of the ambition, but to do it in a way where you're scaling with agents and not scaling with human capital, which of course makes the margins look better and makes this kind of more of a venture scale type opportunity. So it's super early. I'd probably share too much, but I think that there's something here around building brands that I think, as we've talked about, I think is existentially important. But I think the how we get there's opportunity to really kind of reinvent that. And that's what I'm curious about and trying to learn more about.
Super fascinating.
I have a follow-up question. First of all, I'm very excited about this. I think you said that when you work with young founders, and we were at this Taste event, one of the things, like, you know what's good. And I think sometimes people don't know what's good. And I'm probably more of a demand gen, but I still have a sense of what's good, probably less than you and Camille. How do you think people develop that skill, right? Like AI, I feel like every harness has its own style and taste. And I would say most of them don't have actual taste. Maybe Midjourney has taste. But in general, like, how do you discern? And how do you build that skill? Is it just innate?
Yeah. I mean, I think there is an innate component. I think, you see young artists, musical performers, composers, whatever, name it, that are just born with a skill and that they have in whatever application of that, they just have the ability to like know what good is, or the conviction and vision to like guide and set the bar for what good is. That's probably a minority, I would have to think, across the world population, but there's probably a lot of people that are born with a discerning eye for great food, great music, great design, great art. I would argue for the rest of us, this is what separates knowledge from wisdom. Knowledge is ChatGPT. It's gone. It's like I can prompt my way to access the world's knowledge, right, in one easy kind of prompt box. But wisdom is the ability to know and interpret and leverage your experience to apply knowledge, ask better questions, push kind of what might be on the other side. And so I'll give it, I'll say that the benefit to having been in an industry for a while, or been in a job function in a while, or whatever, I think is to suggest that there's value in wisdom, and some of that I think is where taste can come from.
What's interesting also about this whole agentic layer sort of on top of something that is quite rare, and that is allowing you to power a lot of this, which is your particular aptitude, I think, for collecting all this customer data in a way that lends itself especially well to this type of work. And I'm curious if you can give us just a little window into how you became so good at that and what it looks like to be so good at that.
Well, and this is part where I would not claim to be innately good at that. I claim to have sat in on a lot of different brand strategy projects, and pattern matching, and saying a lot of these look the same. Like, it starts with intake, and then you have these sort of like stakeholder interviews where you're looking outside of our four walls and asking our customers kind of what they think about us, and partners and so on, developing these emotional territories and spaces. So I think that that's more of kind of seeing how great stories are formed, and how not only do we develop it, but kind of in so doing are executing the change management required to bring people along for it. Because brand is just as emotional and felt as it is functional, right? And so we want to make sure that it's representing what our founder's vision is, but that our sales team can feel excited about it as well, as we have to bring people along. So all that to be said, that was more of what's driven my approach. But what I'm kind of surprised about is, and you see a lot of these, not a lot, you see some of these platforms and a lot of these companies kind of coming to life that are like, hey, 3 clicks away and we'll build your brand for you or something. And I'm like, maybe friction's a good thing in some cases. Maybe we need to like intentionally slow down in certain parts of the process, not in a way that's going to blow up the company or whatever. But
well, I think without being pressed by a human, a lot of these agents will just choose the first most plausible answer. And you don't get to really incredible brand moments by stopping there, in my experience.
I think that's right. If I were to think about it like a temperature gauge or something, I think if you were to prompt Claude or ChatGPT or whatever and just kind of take the output, you'll get something that's like 50% good, I think, on the other side of it. Context, knowledge, institutional knowledge, anything we can feed it to help it kind of frame the decision might take it to 80%, 85%. And I think if you bake in a 5% margin for the models just getting better over time and just this obviously like it constantly improving, I think the terminal kind of value for brand, holistically speaking, something in the 90% range. The extra 10%, I fundamentally believe will remain a human job to say like, okay, how did we get there? Asking the right questions, pushing and shaping it to actually get either the positioning in the right place, the design of the asset to the right place, the execution of the event or some of the decisions. I just believe that that's fundamentally the last mile, as well as maybe crafting and building the initial inputs, remain just a core part of the human job.
There's also an interesting piece there where it's like, brand moments tend to succeed because they are meeting a particular moment in the overarching discourse. And like people sort of reading the room in terms of what that audience really wants to hear from them at that point in time. And I'm curious if AI is ever going to be able to be like, hey, we're sensing that this is a thing people want to hear from you if you do it right.
I completely agree. That's powerful.
I mean, I see it as brand is, and I think it's like the Vogue editor who is so ruthless and has a vision and cuts down everything, and they are not creating anything, but they are like, and I just don't think AI will ever be able to be that editor. A human is, the AI can take you 95% there, they can put together, but what gets kept and what gets cut, it's just something that maybe we'll get there, but I don't think anytime soon, not with the current like evolution of the models.
Isn't it the same as in engineering in the sense that engineers aren't writing code anymore, or we're getting to that world very quickly, but our job is still to like ensure that the code is being written, is reviewed and is ready to push to production. And I wonder if that's a similar model that we will follow in marketing. The blog post is written, but it was good. Like, is it going to actually be published? Is it, does it read the room in the moment? Like, what if it says something that like certainly is in the data and the context, but is completely inappropriate with what's happening this week?
Or that so many people have already said.
Yes, exactly.
I think that's the other thing. Being original is very hard. I'm trying to write a big post about GTM engineering with AI, and it's helping me gather the data, but it cannot make any original points.
Yeah, there you go.
Cool. So I think maybe as we end, maybe we ask you some spicy questions again. What's something you believe about marketing right now that most people in the world will push back on? Like basically, what's your unpopular belief about marketing?
You mean the last 51 minutes and 50 seconds wasn't enough to, I think brand in general. Yeah, no, I mean, I'm joking just to say that brand, I think in general feels like such a obvious example for people. Like it's, the conversation is around AEO, right? And performance marketing. And I think that feels like where all of the attention and investment is going. Like I can't think of one brand agent that has really kind of broken through yet. I have to convince a lot of people, even for Goldenhour still, like to this day, that this will work because it's hard to measure. And that's the piece that I think is like, ironically, the thing that is the hardest to measure, I think is the most important. And that might be something that people will very much disagree with me on.
How about if we're, for our next guest, I don't actually know who it is, what would be one question that you'd ask them? Like what's something you'd ask someone like you on the podcast?
I think one piece that I've liked to dig into people is how are you sort of protecting your humanity in this world where everything is moving so fast, changing so quickly. We are, rethinking the value we bring professionally, in the world. It's both really exciting and folks that are leaning in, but it's also quite a bit overwhelming. And so how are you investing in yourself to build resilience in this season of our industry that everything is changing so fast?
How are you doing it, Anthony?
Well, I think the 1099 life transition helped me a little bit from a time management perspective. I'm turning 40 this year as well. So I've tried to take my get my health back in gear. So trying to take like nutrition and fitness. I've got more seriously, and I've signed up for Function Health and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, so I'm trying to think about that a lot more, make that just critically as much of my daily rhythm as it is checking email or being on Slack or whatever.
Yeah, I think that all really matters. I remember talking to Ivan at Notion at the very beginning of all that, and he was like, we have to treat ourselves as Olympic athletes, Camille.
Yes, totally.
And he would truly never compromise on exercising in a way
That's
that
amazing.
I really respect. Yeah. Yeah.
Great example. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I'm very bad at this, but my co-founder Alex is amazing. So I'm trying to follow him, but it's so hard when you're into things.
Thank you for being here, representing the point of view that humans are still deeply, deeply necessary. We couldn't agree more here on the show. And it's great to talk to somebody who's so expert at it himself.
Awesome. Thank you all. Thank you so much. And love the show. So excited to keep listening. And thank you so much for having me be a part of it.
Thanks, Anthony.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. If you found this conversation valuable, help more people find the show.
Hit subscribe so you don't miss future episodes, rate, review, or share with a colleague who may be navigating the same challenges.
Want to dive deeper? Head to fom.xyz for show notes, resources, and more. See you next time.